This is Mike Franklin, the property tax guy, and today we're going to talk about the lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors that was concluded in 2024. It was filed in 2019. I asked Grok what was the basis and the result of the lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors, and this is what Grok came up with, and so I'm going to review it with you. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with assessment matters? Because that's what this YouTube channel is all about, assessment matters. Well, if you're concerned about assessment matters, it means you're a property owner, which means that in the past you've probably interacted with the real estate industry, and that you're likely to in the future. Either you or your estate, or you might sell your current property, look to buy another one. You're going to interact with the real estate industry again. And so I, being a licensed New York State real estate broker, a non-realtor, I am not a realtor, I don't belong to the National Association of Realtors, for the very reason of this lawsuit that I'm going to describe to you. I wanted to sue the National Association of Realtors, the New York State Association of Realtors, the local Board of Realtors, and the New York State Department of State Licensing Services. For 20 years, I've been angry about this stuff. I wanted to sue these people for a lot more than what this lawsuit is about here. This lawsuit was a class action suit of about 500,000 sellers of real property against the National Association of Realtors and a variety of big box brokers. And basically, the focus that the lawyers who put this class action together focused on was violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act, price fixing. And that's the angle that they figured out that they could attack and be successful with. But trust me, there's a lot more to this problem than just price fixing. And in the end, on average, I'm calculating that these sellers were paid about $1,650 a piece. So I'm estimating that to be about 0.5% on a transaction that they probably paid 6% on. So they got they got 1/12 of what they paid, back. And it's not nothing. The judgment came out to $5.35 billion. It's B with a billion, B for billion. It's a big number. But I think a lot more than 500,000 sellers have been abused by this process. So, not everybody got in on the class action. This fraud has been going on for decades. And but there was a couple positive things come out of the lawsuit. For example, moving forward, if an agent wants to show a property, they have to have a buyer's agreement signed with their prospect in order to show a property. That's a positive thing, because my experience is that I didn't do buyer's agency. I only represented sellers, and I'd have these Yahoo agents bring these people to see properties that had no proof of funds, no mortgage pre-qualification. We don't even know if they're in the market. They're just kicking tires, and they want to look in other people's houses. There's people that do that it's their hobby, and it creates a security issue and a privacy issue. Anyway, so that is a positive thing that came of it. And the other thing is that the MLS isn't allowed to list buyer's cooperation fees anymore, because if you read this thing, they were alleging that that if for example a seller only offered 2%, the agents would steer their prospects to sellers who were offering 3%, and and so all these realtors have to they have to have 22 hours of continuing education every 2 years, and They have to go through the ethical canons and practices of standards of practice of the National Association of Realtors, and these things that they think they're unethical, when clearly this is what they've been doing has been unethical for decades. And it's just hilarious that they're dictating ethics to everybody. It just cracks me up. Except that it's not funny. So anyway, so the lawsuit, I guess, benefited 500,000 people to the tune of $1,650. But what is it doing for you? So now the buyer's agency has to be, negotiated, with the seller, and which is, the way it should be. Should have been that way in the first place. But the bigger problem still exists. The National Association of Realtors, in collusion with the New York State Department of State, the Department of State is endorsing this monopoly and endorsing a certain way of doing business that basically pigeonholes sellers into dealing with a certain type of people. Basically, most realtors are people who can't get jobs. And they're second income people, soccer moms, and things like that. And you got people with $1 million properties listing their homes with people they don't even respect, but they don't have any choice because that's the only people who are in the industry. Because the regulations of the Department of State and the rules of the Board of Realtors and having to work underneath a broker's thumb, it discourages qualified people from entering the market. So it's this very limited type of service that that's being offered. And so I came into the industry right around 2000. The internet was starting to take off and gave the ability to elaborately present properties so that people could see what it is that they might be interested in. And I had some realtors ask me for help, and I saw how pathetic the efforts of the real estate industry was, and I thought I can do that. So I got into it, and initially I didn't have a real estate license, but I was basically forced to get a real estate license. All I wanted to do was help people market their properties, as a marketing consultant, internet marketing consultant. But the law forced me into becoming a realtor, which I never wanted to be. And so then I had to, first I worked for one of my client's sons who just graduated from Harvard Law School, which qualified him to be a broker, but me not. I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I knew something. He knew nothing. And between the two of us, we didn't know much of anything. And really smart kid, really aggressive, hard-working kid, but that just didn't work out. And so I went to work for Coldwell Bankers and get a license because I had trouble getting paid on my deals because you don't have standing in court to collect a fee if you don't have a real estate license. So I got a real estate license. I go to work for Coldwell Banker. My first listing, I had a historic lighthouse. And the seller bypassed my listing, and my broker didn't. The listing agreement is between the broker and the seller. It's just that I, as the agent, I'm the guy that did all the work, and I did a ton of work on this lighthouse, and fielded dozens, perhaps hundreds of calls because every fruitcake on the planet wants a lighthouse, but they can't afford it. But it was good exposure, but they screwed me out of $23,500, and my broker didn't back me up because I had a 75% split with Coldwell Banker, so they only get 25%. So they're not going to spend money on a lawyer to back up my contract. So I was out $23,500. So I gave them the middle finger, and I went to work for a Sotheby's affiliate. And initially, it was great. The guys that I was working for, great guys. Everybody was cooperating, working together. It was a great time, except the 2008 real estate crisis hit, and it stagnated the second home market, which is what I was working in, and basically one by one, the guys that I was working for got bought out because they couldn't make it in that market. So the people that bought them out, year after year, they kept squeezing the independent contractors agreement, and just made it ridiculous to work for them. It was just so abusive, and so they were using my photography to promote competing agents in my territory, and it finally came to a head, and we told each other to screw yourself, and so I became my own broker. By that time, I qualified to be a broker, and so I became my own broker. So I no longer had to be under someone else's thumb, and I didn't have to pay the broker. I didn't have to join the MLS. I was required by that broker to belong to the MLS, pay their ridiculous fees, listen to their ridiculous nonsense with their nod, wink, wink ethics. And I was able to become my own broker finally. Finally, I broke free of the tyranny of this system. But it took me 9 years to do it. And so that's why you don't have people with unique skills entering the real estate market, because they're not going to spend 9 years until they're finally free of the tyranny of this process. And so you're stuck with these soccer moms representing your $1 million property. So I was lucky because I had unique skills that I didn't need the MLS, that I didn't need a broker. I knew how to market myself, and I became a very effective competitor to Sotheby's, as they found out later, and subsequently that broker went out of business. I don't think he ever turned a profit. He was in it for the ego, not for the money, because he didn't know how to market. He didn't know how to leverage the brand that he paid a lot of money for, and he went out of business. And but anyway, this really limits who the sellers have options to do business with, and so sellers are abused by this perpetual system that's enabled by the New York State Association of Realtors. So, what can you as a seller do? Well, just know that these contracts are negotiable. It's like, I don't never ever remember people questioning these board of realtor contracts because they assumed that they couldn't, because it's a monopoly, because basically they couldn't. And but if a realtor puts a contract in front of you, feel free to start crossing things off. Add whatever you want. If you expect them to do things, you better put it in writing. Make an addendum. If you're expecting to advertise in certain places and do this and do that, put it in the contract. Because if you don't, they're not going to do it. Because what's going on is the broker is using the agent's time, my time back in the day, and the seller's largest asset in a money-for-nothing scheme. That's how these big box brokers can afford to pay millions of dollars in this lawsuit, because they got the money off the backs of these agents and the seller's assets. So understand that that's what they're doing to you. Read the contract. Have your lawyer review the contract. Scratch out the offensive stuff and add your own stuff. You have the right to negotiate it, and if they don't like your edits, I guess they don't get the listing, do they? So, so it's going to be hard to find people in the real estate industry that actually know how to market. All they know how to do is list things in the MLS, post it in the MLS, and pray. And it may work for certain types of properties. Say you've got a house in a subdivision, the MLS might work. But if you've got a house in a subdivision, you can put it in Zillow yourself and put a sign in your front yard. You go to Home Depot and you make a sign, and you just go into Zillow and you add your listing, take some pictures, You can take pictures as good as these realtors can. But what I did is I specialized in properties that didn't work in the MLS. Unique properties where the buyer isn't necessarily somebody looking in that particular school district. I had one property, multi-million-dollar property, and my understanding was there was only one child in that township that went to a school district. They had to ship them to another school district. There were more bears in that township than there were children. And so obviously nobody's looking, for that school district. It's a unique property, and the buyer could come from anywhere in the world because it's that unique of a property. And the local MLS is going to do nothing for that property because there is no local market for that property. And so those are the types of properties I worked on: historic properties, properties where the buyer maybe from New York City, D.C., Dallas, anywhere in the country. And I handled properties in the Thousand Islands, Adirondacks, Catskills, Finger Lakes, Southern Tier, Mohawk Valley. Wherever there was a unique property, that's where I went. And you don't need the MLS for those properties. And you certainly don't want these yahoos going through your house on a lockbox, And so anyway, so this lawsuit is it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think that these people are liable for much, much more. I think that there should be a lawsuit against them for what they're doing to the agents, and I think the Department of State should be a party to that lawsuit. But there's more than just price fixing. It's just an overall monopoly that's abusive. As far as buyers are concerned, I never did buyer's agency, so I'm not going to speak on that. I'm certain that there's abuses in that as well, but I can't speak on it because I never did. I never did it. So I have no expertise. But sellers are being seriously abused by this process, even after this lawsuit. So, buyer beware, or in this case, seller beware. Just know that you can alter that contract, and you can negotiate it, and if you can't find a negotiated good deal, consider doing a for sale by owner. I'd be happy to help you do a for sale by owner. I'm happy to just do the marketing. I don't need to broker the property. If you don't want to do an exclusive deal, just pay me to do the marketing. But however you want to handle it. But that's what's happening to sellers and agents, and it's outrageous. This is Mike Franklin, the Property Tax Guy.